Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought we would talk about a new vehicle that came out in the update, the first vehicle that I've actually spaded from the new updates. It is the Scimitar. This is a British light tank which finds itself at 7.7. It's built on the CVRT chassis and also has a very similar turret to what you'll find on a Fox. So it's a mishmash of two ideas that we already have in the game, and to be honest, very much feels like it. At 7.7, Britain has a fantastic set of vehicles. The Conqueror is incredibly fun. It's one of those which I know people can't always rely on the gun, but it seems to work pretty well for me. Stuff like the Centurion Mark III is always very stable. Stuff like the Centurion Mark V from the good old Battle Pass is also fantastic as well. And then of course you have the Fox, which is there, and the Eland, so you have your light tank complement too. The only thing you don't really have is an AA, and unfortunately the Scimitar doesn't really fill that role, and the Fox doesn't either, so that kind of sucks. You do actually have very good cast support though. You know, you have some of the early jets for Britain, and the early jets are very good. Stuff like the early Meteors, the Attacker, for example, with its bombs, and also you can even bring some of the bigger bombs as well if you want to bring the bombers from 6.0, which could be quite fun. The unfortunate fact about it though is at 8.0 you have some very good cast elements, so unfortunately you lose those because you're at 7.7. And let's be brutally honest about the Scimitar, okay? Before we get really into its stats, really into its playstyle, really into all of this, what is it? It's a worse Fox. And right now, the Fox is at the same BR. So if you have both of them researched, they both kind of fill the same role, they both fit on the battlefield in the same way, they both play the same. There's not really a point in playing the Scimitar unless you don't have the Fox researched. If you actually bring both of them in a lineup, I feel like it's actually doing a disservice to the lineup, because both of these vehicles are first spawn, first aggressive, get a lot of scouts, get your team on the front foot type of vehicles, whereas if you bring them in a second or third spawn, you're probably going to get donked by AA, you're probably going to have more mobility where you're able to move around more, but your team isn't going to be in a position where you're able to use their firepower with your scouting combo, which is something you have to do with these vehicles, especially around the BRs. So, unfortunately for the Scimitar, it's just worse than something else that's already at its BR, and that's basically because of the mobility. The Fox surprisingly actually has some better armor than the Simi as well. On the hull, which is why people struggle against the Fox from the front, it surprisingly has quite a decent amount of armor against autocannons, whereas the Scimitar doesn't. So the Scimitar actually gets pieced up quite easily through the hull, where it only has 37mm. So, in a way, the Scimitar has worse armor and worse mobility, and obviously the same gun, so it doesn't do better in that setup. So that kind of sucks for the vehicle, right? Because you want a vehicle to be useful, you want a vehicle to kind of fit in the game where it is, but it just kind of doesn't. Until the Fox either moves BR, or until the Scimitar moves BR, which I doubt it will, then you have this awful situation for it, where it's just kind of a worse version that's what's already there. I'm still very happy to see it though, and I'm very happy that I played it, because it was a very fun experience, because it was similar to the Fox, which was a great experience too, with some of the issues that I ran into when the Fox first came out not being present on the Scimitar, such as the engine being a bit crazy on the Fox in terms of sound. There were a few things I did run into with the Scimitar though that were a little bit weird. So, I think it's bugged. I might be wrong, but it seems to be bugged. Basically, if you are on an incline with the Scimitar, stationary, just standing still, your driver will just constantly rev the engine over and over and over again. Basically, without you moving forward or back, it's as if he's just trying to keep the position where he's at, so he's just revving constantly, which is really weird. Another part of it, and I don't think this is a bug, this is just an unfortunate thing, it's with the smoke grenades of the Scimitar. They fire in sets of 2. You have 8 of them overall, so you technically have 4 launches, which overall is pretty good to be able to reposition, and also in tandem with the transmission, which means that you can fly about the place backwards and also forwards. It means that you can reposition really well with this vehicle. But the first set of smoke grenades you fire, the first 2 are really wide. And what ends up happening is you toss them, and instead of it actually covering your vehicle, it creates a tunnel where the enemy can just see straight through at your vehicle and nothing else either side. So it actually does the opposite of what you want smokes to do. So if you are trying to hide yourself from the enemy, you're going to have to send out 2 salvos of smokes to start with. If you're looking to maybe reposition left or right, then those smokes work really well. But yeah, it literally creates a corridor where the only thing the enemy can see is you. And obviously that is not great for the vehicle. It still has the Rarden gun, the L21A1, so when you stock, you get this wonderful APHE round, which only pens 53mm, so unless you're aiming for very weak spots on some vehicles, you're not really going to go through. Surprisingly, there was a lot of matches which were 6-7 to 7-0, or 7-0 to 8-0, even though the vehicle's 7-7. Didn't see a lot of 8-3 and 8-7s, really surprisingly, and this meant that I ran into a lot of heavy tanks. And with all the heavy tanks around, you can't really pen them with the APHE. With the APDS belt, though, which you get at rank 3, which, to be honest, it didn't take actually too long to get. I was kind of surprised that it only took maybe like 10, maybe 12 matches in order to get the APDS. Like, the spade for this was relatively fast compared to many of the other machines. It meant that I could start actually penetrating stuff. Like, for example, if you actually get a Tiger 2 or at a perpendicular, you can actually pen it with the Scimitar, which is really nice. And also stuff like the American heavies, which is something you'll also run into quite a lot. Like, there was a lot of T-34s wandering around, a lot of T-26 E5s, a lot of super Bershings, surprisingly. So even when, you know, I wasn't able to actually penetrate them, I could scout them, and then I could, you know, sort them out that way, and it was actually really nice. So overall, the APDS did help out a lot with dealing with these vehicles, but even before then, I did feel quite powerless in order to take them out, and therefore the APHE was only really useful against certain light vehicles and also against specific weak spots. Like, for example, the M48/M60 cupola, the commander one, where you can kind of donk people on top of it. The other problem with the gun is it's crazy bouncy, and this is the suspension issue as well. This thing has, it seems like it has incredibly loose suspension, so you just bong bong bang bang all around the place. And since the optics on this are actually pretty good for what you have, it means that sometimes lining up the gun straight away is really hard to do. The optics themselves are 10 times on the commander optics and 10 times on the gunner optics, but you can't zoom in and out. They're a stationary 10 times, so when you change to your optic and you've just like slowed down to get a shot off, your gun is wobbling all over the place, and it can be a little bit jarring. So you have to make sure that you are in a positive position, or your enemy isn't going to shoot at you while you are resetting your gun. And that is another kind of little issue with the vehicle compared to the Fox. The gun feels way more bouncy on this one compared to the Fox 2, even though this one is technically slower in the acceleration and just kind of mobility than it. So the Scimitar itself, I had a really good time with. You know, running it with the Conqueror, which is one of my favorite heavy tanks, was super fun. Being able to respade a bunch of aircraft while I was doing it, and also being pretty, you know, positive with the team, getting in aggressive situations. Unfortunately, running into areas where, you know, I couldn't pen anything was kind of annoying, but you're always going to get that with these types of vehicles, which don't have a ton of penetration. The Scimitar, at least, it has more penetration than a lot of light vehicles of this BR, and you know when it does penetrate, the cone of damage that something like this creates is insane. The amount of times that I one-tapped like a bulldog or one-tapped a vehicle where it's just plink, bang, and it's because the cone is insane for how big this 30mm is, which is probably why they are looking to change it, because of the fact that you do so much post-pen damage. And it'll be interesting to see what the Scimitar's like after they do that change. But right now, it's fun, it's enjoyable, and it fits perfectly in the lineup. You know, you have the heavy, you have the medium, you have, you know, the CAS. This is a perfect aggressive platform to get your team on the front foot and to get you on the front foot. The only problem is, you might as well just use the Fox, which unfortunately does the same thing. So that's basically where you sat. We played 31 battles in the Scimitar to get it spaded, 49 ground kills, 2 air kills, 28 deaths, and a 45% win rate. And that's pretty standard, by the way, for my British vehicles. For some reason, I can do pretty well with them, but still get pretty naff win rates. For example, my Chieftain Mark III, I have 265 battles in it. I'm plus 80 in the KDA, you know, done quite a lot in it, 38% win rate. So don't be surprised when you see low win rates around this BR for Britain. I don't know why, it just happens for me. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.